So now that we've created profiles and understood how each of the macronutrients factor into blood sugar control, let's take a look at some of the dietary aspects that come with low carb approaches like ketogenic or carnivore. It requires us to take a deeper look at something called gluconeogenesis. It's a cool way that our body makes fuel from things that aren't glucose. And it's something that we all need to know about as people with diabetes, with all of this circulation around high carb, low carb, high fat, low fat.
So gluconeogenesis is by definition the process by which the body produces glucose from non-carbohydrate sources, primarily in the liver. These key sources can be proteins and their amino acids, fats, and specific portions of those triglycerides, as well as lactate, which is from anaerobic exercise. Everyone kind of knows the soreness you experience after a workout. That buildup of lactic acid, lactate, is a part of that. That can actually be turned into fuel through gluconeogenesis. Just an interesting little tidbit there. But why does it actually happen? So gluconeogenesis ensures a steady supply of glucose for the essential organs like the brain, especially during fasting or low carb intake, right? So in states where our body is running low on its fuel of choice, which is glucose, it has the ability to turn things that are not glucose into glucose. This is part of the reason why you experience dawn phenomenon. So dawn phenomenon is that early morning spike that a lot of people with diabetes experience right as they wake up or as they begin to start their day. And this has to do with this, can involve gluconeogenesis. It can involve with glycogen release. There's a couple different ways that it can come about. But essentially, you've been fasting all night. You haven't eaten since the last time you ate, 8, 10, 12 hours ago. So when you wake up as part of your circadian rhythm, your liver knows that you need a little bump of sugar, of glucose, to get your day started and kind of start the active part of your day. And so your liver is essentially serving you breakfast every morning before you even need to eat anything. So this can happen long fasts. Again, I'm willing to bet that it starts to kick in anywhere after like 16, 18 hours. That's probably when you're getting into peak gluconeogenesis, and it'll only compound after that. Protein meals, again, mentioned with carnivore, that this is going to help spur that gluconeogenesis, especially when there's low carb availability. And then after intense exercise, right, with that lactate being a possible alternative fuel source after extensive exercise, your liver is going to turn that lactate into glucose for your body to actually use. So its impact on blood sugars. Even without consuming carbs, gluconeogenesis can raise your blood sugar. Okay, so I know plenty of people with diabetes get so frustrated. They're like, whether it be a fast or just a long period of time in their day where they haven't eaten, they're like, why would my blood sugar go up? I haven't even eaten any carbs. This is because in that fasted state, your liver is turning things into glucose to kind of help facilitate energy within the body. You just don't have the insulin to use it, right? So it can lead to unexpected spikes, especially overnight, like I mentioned before, with dawn phenomenon. So whether or not you are eating carbs, your body knows how to turn stuff that isn't carbs into carbs. So you need to be mindful of that, whether you're fasted, whether you're on a low-carb diet, what have you. Regardless of whether you're eating your sugar or your body is converting things that you do eat into sugar, you're going to need insulin to make sure that it's being used properly by the cell. Personal little tidbit, I have tried ketogenic several times. I think I went 6 months, my early 20s, and then I tried it for a period of time after that, 3 or 4 months. I really enjoyed it, to be honest, in terms of like the food selection, my energy, the weight. I felt good. They were my worst A1Cs. I was in like the mid to high 8s. And because I was of the mindset, well, I'm not eating a lot of carbs, I probably don't need to be worrying about it. And I just was not being very good at having diabetes, and wasn't properly tracking my blood sugars. But just, again, even for those who are interested in ketogenic and carnivore as a means of blood sugar management, you still need to be mindful of your blood sugars. You still need to make sure that you're using the appropriate amount of insulin. It may be less insulin, but you're still going to need some. It can really mess with your blood sugars. So, ways to manage gluconeogenesis, whether you want to get it started on those carnivore and ketogenic diets, or you're trying to prevent it from happening. Composition, right? Pair your proteins with fat and fiber to make sure that you're slowing glucose release. Even if you are ketogenic or carnivore, you need to make sure that you're getting some source of fiber in there. That can kind of help the movement of food. Basal insulin, so basal rates for pump users, if you're using long lasting as someone who's using an MDI or injections. Your basal rates and your long lasting are meant to accommodate that slow release of glycogen, that kind of like baseline release from non-carbohydrate sources. So if you are in a fasted state, it may be beneficial for you to monitor your basal rates and see if you need to increase or decrease depending on where you are along your fast. So make sure, even if you're not doing anything in particular dietarily, monitoring your nighttime numbers is going to give you some insight into how your body and your insulin levels operate during that fasted state when you're turning not carbs into carbs. Obviously, track your patterns, right? You'll start to realize your body, and this is the importance of routine as well. You get to learn a little bit more about how your body operates for a long period of time. If you have a CGM, identify those trends and how you operate, and then make adjustments accordingly. Your basal rates or your carb to unit ratio. Exercise timing. So you want to avoid protein meals immediately after intense workouts if you notice those spikes, because again, those really intense exercise outs are going to cause your body to turn that lactate into glucose, and then you compound that with protein. Again, you're giving that gluconeogenesis cycle multiple sources of fuel to turn into glucose. And this is going to be just a little bit different for everyone. Obviously, pay attention to your unique condition. Made sure I always bolus just a little bit after that exercise to see how my body operated, because physical activity can also increase your sensitivity to insulin at the same time. So yes, you are producing more glucose, but you're also becoming more insulin sensitive. So those two can kind of cancel themselves out. I don't want anyone to think, oh, well, I exercised, I've got to give myself extra insulin here. Always be mindful of what your numbers are telling you in the moment. Don't try to read into anything too much. Just, over time, you'll learn what works best for you. So, looking at the specifics of ketogenic and carnivore diets, so the pros. Stabilize blood sugars because you're having that low carb intake. You're not having those immediate spikes. Gluconeogenesis is going to take a little bit more time in terms of turning proteins and fats into glucose. Immediate reduced insulin needs and improved insulin sensitivity. This can also change over time as well. I've heard people in using both of those diets have worsened insulin sensitivity. It really depends on their state of inflammation, right? You can be eating carnivore but still be engaged in some inflammatory habits. You just need to be paying attention to your unique situation. Then obviously the potential benefits for weight management and energy levels, because now you're using fat as a source of energy, a primary source of energy. You're going to be burning body fat instead of the immediate food intake as if you were consuming glucose. So those are the pros. Cons. Because when people start this, it takes time for them to adjust out of their usual insulin routine. So if you go ketogenic, if you go carnivore, but you keep the basal rates that you had when you weren't, you need to make sure that your blood sugar is not going too low or too high, depending on how you ramp yourself up to either or. Nutrient cons: nutrient imbalances and reduced variety in micronutrient intake. Got to make sure you're getting fiber. Obviously, meats specifically as a protein and a fat source, they have a very rich nutrient profile, but they don't have everything, right? There are plant sources of nutrients that are going to help complement those found in meat. You just eat meat or you just eat very fatty, low carb meals, you may be missing out on some of the nutrients necessary to properly utilize the nutrients in the fat and the protein. Okay. There are concerns about long-term sustainability. I'm not here to comment on them. This is all just an experiment for everyone. If it works for you, I'm glad. If it doesn't, it doesn't matter. You can choose something else. This is just find what works best for you. Make sure you're covering as many bases as you know are there. Be ready to adjust as you go. There was a time where I was like, oh my God, ketogenic is the best. I wanted to tell everyone and their mother about it. And then I just learned more about it, found out I wanted to try something else, and I moved on from it. I haven't gone back since, but I get it. Okay. And at the bottom there in the smaller text there, who might benefit? Now, I think ketogenic and carnivore have their greatest benefit for people who are in the early stages of addressing inflammation. I will say that the protein and fat-rich foods tend to be less meddled with from a artificial enrichment and fortification standpoint, and as well as herbicides and pesticides. So you're kind of removing a lot of that junk and that noise that you're getting from carb-containing foods. That can be a good thing in terms of calming the waters of inflammation. Long term, though, now you need to start to consider what the nutrient profile is. And the good things, just because there were some bad things in those carb-containing foods doesn't mean you aren't going to miss the good things that were there. So you need to be mindful of both of those moving forward.